Hi guys, Darrel Smith from South Dakota again. It was Vietnam, 1966, and I just thought about it. It's hard to believe that's 60 years ago, and these memories are still pretty clear in my head. The limited military action that started the Vietnam War had now evolved into an all-out war. I was based at Chulai, a Marine Air Base, and we had 4 squadrons of A4s. And if you don't know what an A4 is, you can look it up. You might even type in squadron, one of the squadrons and the aircraft, and you probably see some of the airplanes that I flew. I flew combat missions in VMA 121, VMA 211, and I was in VMA 214 for a while, but that's a different story. So type in VMA 121 Vietnam A4 Skyhawk, and you'll see pictures of some of the planes that I flew. Well, the war was heating up. It was a full swing. We had about 80 aircraft on the field, and we flew them every day. And we bombed the whole countryside in central Vietnam. One of our targets was the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and that trail was famous for resupplying the troops, the North Vietnamese troops that were in South Vietnam. It started in North Vietnam and went into Laos, and then had several portions of it that split off into South Vietnam. And there was one of the forks of that trail that came directly at my base, about, I would say, 40 or 50 miles from where I was stationed. So one of the main targets that we hit was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And on this particular day, it was a 4-plane flight, and I failed to mention that the name of this little story is Under Arrest. It was a 4-plane. I was not the leader. I believe I was third in position there, third plane, and we were loaded with bombs to the maximum, and it was a day VFR flight, so we could see. We started our engines, checked in with our leader, and single file taxied out to the runway. It was part of our procedure to check the exterior of the other aircraft in the flight, so you'd look and see if there was anything unusual that was going on with the aircraft that the pilot couldn't see from the cockpit. With that done, we had clearance for takeoff. The leader taxied onto the runway. It was a narrow runway, so we didn't have room for more than one aircraft. So as the leader started to roll, the next guy taxied into the takeoff position. As he started to roll, I taxied into the takeoff position. I got lined up on the runway, ran my engine up, everything looked good. And as he lifted off, I added full power and released the brakes. And I started accelerating slowly, but it was a hot day and we were heavily loaded, so that didn't seem unusual to me. Now, a lot of the procedures that we had a scan pattern, and it was pretty simple for takeoff. It was line up and airspeed, line up and airspeed. So you're keeping the aircraft on the center line of the airport, of the runway, and watching your airspeed build until it reached the point where you could rotate and go flying. Well, my airspeed came up maybe a little slower, but I'm not sure. It seemed pretty normal. And I got slightly over 100 miles per hour. And I was checking line up, airspeed, line up, airspeed. Well, on 2 or 3 checks of the airspeed, that needle had not moved. It was not accelerating. Of course, it got my full attention then, and I started watching the airspeed, and it was not increasing. So I had to make a decision really fast. Up until that moment, every flight in the Marine Corps had resulted in me becoming airborne and coming back for a successful landing. But I had to immediately go from a takeoff state of mind or point of thinking to a stopping this thing somehow. So, and I had to do it in a few seconds. When I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get airborne, I pulled the engine to idle and dropped the hook. On every airport in the Navy and Marine Corps, toward the end of the runway, there's arresting gear. It's cable stretched across the runway, and in every tactical airplane of the Navy and the Marine Corps, they have tail hooks. In the cockpit, as on a normal takeoff, daily, we did it every day. As you rotated and got airborne, you'd pull the gear up, and that was a lever just to the left. You could easily reach it with your left hand, put it in the up position, and of course the wheels, the landing gear would come up. The tail hook was in the opposite position, same position, but in the opposite side of the cockpit. So all you had to do was take a small lever. In fact, it was shaped like a tail hook, had a little curl on the end. So all you had to do was push that down. So I pulled it to idle, put the dropped the tail hook. I was successful. The aircraft caught the wire and came to a quick stop. I shut down the engine, opened the cockpit, got my personal gear together, and by that time the emergency crew had arrived. They put a ladder in the side of the airplane, and I climbed out, calm. I was happy that I felt that I had followed the procedures to do a successful arrested landing. Well, as soon as my feet touched the runway, my knees started to shake, and my hands joined in with enthusiasm right away. I was a very lucky young pilot to catch that wire. If I had missed the wire, the airplane would have gone off the end of the runway. It would have crashed, and the fuel for sure would have burned, and maybe some of the bombs would have cooked off. I don't know. Those airplanes were equipped with what we called a 0-0 ejection seats, and that meant you could be sitting on the deck, 0 altitude, and sitting still, 0 airspeed, and there was the ejection seat would clear you from the aircraft safely. It was a rocket assisted seat, so you would be put up into the air and a parachute would open in time for you to survive. I was lucky in that I did catch that wire. I talked to a pilot who happened to be where he could see my takeoff roll, and he said that a flame was coming out of my tailpipe about 20 feet, he guessed at. That was not normal. Our little airplanes did not have afterburner, so there should not be any flame coming out the tailpipe. The very next day, I found that aircraft and looked in the tailpipe, and there were small pea-sized pieces of metal in the bottom of the tailpipe there. So there was something seriously wrong with that engine, and that little airplane was not gonna fly. I was a lucky guy to catch that arresting gear. I like to say that I was put under arrest, and I was darn glad to be under arrest. The war roared on. It was a combat situation. Nobody even interviewed me about that flight, and I never had to write a report about that flight. I was scheduled, my next flight was, combat flight was scheduled the next morning. I flew it. Thank you.